Flight attendants, prepare for impact. The haunting words of Captain Alfred Haynes echo through the cabin of United Airlines Flight 232 as the crippled DC-10 approaches Sioux City Airport on July 19, 1989, carrying 296 souls toward what would become one of aviation's most miraculous and heartbreaking stories of survival against impossible odds. Among the passengers, 11-year-old Sabrina Lee Michelson had made a simple decision just hours earlier that would determine whether she lived to see another day or became one of the 111 victims of this unthinkable disaster. In the cruel mathematics of aviation tragedy, a child's innocent desire for a better view would become the difference between a family reunion and a funeral, between dreams fulfilled and futures forever lost. Tonight, we uncover the devastating true story of how a single seat change transformed a routine family vacation into a tragedy that would forever alter our understanding of survival, fate, and the razor-thin line between life and death at 37,000 feet. The morning of July 19th dawned clear and bright in Denver, Colorado, as families across the country prepared for summer adventures that would create memories to last a lifetime. The Rocky Mountains stood majestically against the azure sky, their snow-capped peaks catching the early morning sunlight in a display of natural beauty that promised perfect flying weather for the hundreds of flights departing Denver's Stapleton International Airport. The Michelson family had spent weeks planning their vacation to Ohio, where they would visit relatives and explore the heartland of America together, creating those precious family bonds that would sustain them through whatever challenges life might bring. 11-year-old Sabrina bounced with excitement as she helped her parents pack the final items into their carry-on luggage, her mind already racing ahead to the cousins she would see and the adventures that awaited in the green farmlands of Ohio, where her grandparents had built a life filled with love and tradition. Her younger brother Tommy, just 8 years old, clutched his favorite toy airplane as they made their way through the bustling corridors of Denver's Stapleton International Airport, completely unaware that real aviation would soon become far more terrifying than any toy could ever represent. The little boy had spent countless hours making airplane sounds as he flew his plastic DC-10 around the family living room, never imagining that the same aircraft type would soon carry him into a nightmare that would test the limits of human endurance and engineering capability. Their parents, David and Margaret Michelson, moved through the pre-flight routine with the casual confidence of experienced travelers, checking boarding passes and organizing carry-on items while discussing the relatives they would soon see and the family stories they would share during their week-long visit to Ohio. United Airlines Flight 232 sat gleaming on the tarmac, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 that embodied the pinnacle of 1970s aviation engineering with its distinctive three-engine configuration and wide-body design that had revolutionized long-distance air travel by making transcontinental flights economical and comfortable for millions of passengers. The aircraft, registration N1819U, had been delivered to United Airlines in 1971 and had faithfully served passengers for 18 years, accumulating over 43,000 flight hours while connecting cities across America with the reliability that made commercial aviation the safest form of transportation ever devised by human ingenuity. Her three General Electric CF6 engines represented state-of-the-art technology, with the unique rear engine mounted in the tail providing redundancy that engineers believed made catastrophic failure virtually impossible under normal operating conditions. The DC-10's design incorporated multiple backup systems that were intended to ensure safe flight even in the event of significant mechanical failures, with three independent hydraulic systems providing the muscle needed to move the massive control surfaces that kept the aircraft stable and responsive to pilot commands. Each system operated independently, powered by different sources, and routed through separate pathways to prevent any single failure from compromising the aircraft's controllability. The engineering philosophy that guided the DC-10's development assumed that the simultaneous failure of all three hydraulic systems was so unlikely as to be virtually impossible, an assumption that would be tragically challenged on this July afternoon over the cornfields of Iowa. Captain Alfred Haynes took his position in the left seat of the cockpit with the quiet confidence of a pilot who had logged over 33,000 flight hours during his distinguished career with United Airlines, representing a generation of aviators who had witnessed the transformation of commercial aviation from propeller-driven aircraft to the sophisticated jets that now carried millions of passengers safely across the globe every year. At 57 years old, he represented the gold standard of commercial aviation, a professional whose experience encompassed every conceivable flight scenario, from routine domestic hops to challenging international crossings in weather conditions that would test the limits of both aircraft and crew capabilities. His logbooks told the story of a career devoted to aviation excellence, with commendations for his professionalism and safety consciousness that had earned him the respect of colleagues and passengers alike. First Officer William Records brought his own substantial expertise to the right seat, a skilled aviator whose training and experience complemented Captain Haynes's leadership in creating the kind of cockpit team that passengers trusted implicitly when they placed their lives in the hands of commercial aviation professionals. Flight engineer Dudley Dvorak occupied the complex control panel that monitored the DC-10's systems, his trained eyes scanning instruments and gauges that provided real-time information about the health and performance of the aircraft's engines, hydraulics, electrical systems, and dozens of other components that worked in harmony to keep the massive airliner operating safely within its design parameters as they prepared for what should have been a routine 2-hour and 30-minute flight to Philadelphia. The passenger manifest told the story of American mobility at its finest, with business travelers heading to important meetings that could shape their careers, families beginning long-awaited vacations that represented months of saving and planning, and individuals pursuing dreams that required them to cross the continent in pursuit of opportunities that awaited in distant cities. Retired couples settled into their seats with guidebooks and cameras, planning to document every moment of trips they had saved years to afford, their excitement tempered by the wisdom that comes with understanding how precious these opportunities for adventure become in the later chapters of life. Young professionals organized laptops and documents for presentations that could define their futures, trusting in the miracle of modern aviation to deliver them safely to destinations where their careers and aspirations awaited fulfillment. Children pressed their faces against windows to watch ground crews prepare the massive aircraft for departure, their excitement infectious as they anticipated the magic of flight that would lift them above the clouds and carry them across states and time zones to places they had only imagined. Business travelers reviewed meeting notes and rehearsed presentations, their minds focused on the professional challenges that awaited while trusting completely in the aircraft and crew to handle the complex task of safe transportation. Families shared snacks and organized entertainment for the flight ahead, creating those small moments of togetherness that become precious memories when viewed from the perspective of loss and tragedy. In seat 20G, young Sabrina Michelson had initially settled beside her family, her bright eyes taking in the organized chaos of passengers boarding and flight attendants completing their pre-flight preparations. As travelers continued filing aboard and the cabin filled with the familiar sounds of carry-on luggage being stowed and seat assignments being verified, she noticed an empty seat several rows ahead that offered a better view of the wing and engine that fascinated her young imagination. The massive General Electric turbofan engine hung beneath the wing like a mechanical marvel, its complex internal machinery hidden behind sleek cowlings that spoke of the engineering excellence that made modern aviation possible. The decision to move seemed innocuous, even practical, as it would give the family more room to spread out during the long flight, while allowing Sabrina to satisfy her curiosity about how the massive aircraft actually worked to defy gravity and carry so many people safely through the sky. Her parents approved the seat change with the casual confidence that comes from viewing commercial aviation as completely routine, never imagining that their daughter's position in the cabin could mean the difference between survival and tragedy, between a family that remained whole and one that would be forever broken by the cruel mathematics of disaster. The flight attendant smiled as she helped Sabrina relocate to seat 8G, unaware that this simple accommodation would place the 11-year-old girl in the section of the aircraft that would bear the brunt of the impact forces when United 232 met the ground in Iowa. The boarding process continued with the efficient precision that passengers had come to expect from major airlines, as experienced gate agents and flight attendants guided nearly 300 people through the complex choreography of loading a wide-body aircraft. Carry-on luggage filled overhead bins, while passengers settled into seats that would become their homes for the next few hours. organizing personal items, and preparing for a flight that everyone aboard assumed would be as routine and unremarkable as the thousands of similar flights that departed American airports every day. The aircraft's weight and balance were calculated with mathematical precision, ensuring that the DC-10 would perform within its design parameters throughout the flight profile that lay ahead. The takeoff from Denver proceeded flawlessly as United 232 accelerated down runway 25 and lifted gracefully into the crystal-clear Colorado morning, climbing steadily through the thin mountain air, while the Rocky Mountains fell away beneath them like a geological textbook opened to reveal the dramatic story of tectonic forces and geological time. The cabin service began with the familiar efficiency that passengers had come to expect from United Airlines, as flight attendants distributed beverages and snacks, while the aircraft settled into its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, entering the realm of commercial aviation, where hundreds of aircraft share the same airspace in a carefully choreographed dance of air traffic control and pilot professionalism. The three General Electric engines hummed with mechanical precision as the autopilot guided the DC-10 eastward across the Great Plains, following airways that had carried millions of passengers safely between America's heartland and its eastern population centers. Below, the geometric patterns of agricultural fields stretched to the horizon, testament to human industry and the bounty of American agriculture that fed much of the world. The passengers settled into the rhythm of long-distance flight, with some reading books or magazines, others working on laptops or organizing documents, and many simply gazing out windows at the landscape that unrolled beneath them like a living map of their nation's diversity and productivity. In her new seat, Sabrina had struck up a conversation with the adult passenger beside her, a businessman named James Patterson, who was heading to Philadelphia for a conference that would determine the future direction of his small manufacturing company. He had been initially surprised to find such a young traveling companion, but quickly discovered that Sabrina possessed the kind of natural curiosity and intelligence that made conversation both easy and enjoyable. She peppered him with questions about his work, about the cities he had visited, and about the aircraft itself, displaying the kind of inquisitive mind that teachers and parents recognize as a sign of future academic success and personal achievement. Patterson found himself explaining the basics of how jet engines worked, using simple analogies that helped the 11-year-old understand the complex process by which fuel and air combined to create the tremendous thrust that pushed their aircraft through the thin atmosphere at nearly 600 miles per hour. Their conversation ranged from aviation technology to geography, as Sabrina proved to be remarkably well-informed about the states they were crossing and the cities that lay ahead on their flight path. Other passengers in nearby seats occasionally joined their discussion, creating the kind of spontaneous community that sometimes develops among travelers, sharing the unique experience of flight. Meanwhile, several rows behind in their original seats, the Michelson family had spread out with the additional room that Sabrina's move had provided, with Tommy playing with his toy airplane while his parents reviewed guidebooks and planned their activities for the week ahead in Ohio. They could see their daughter's head in the seat ahead, occasionally turning back to wave at them or share something interesting she had learned from her adult companion. The family felt the contentment that comes with successful travel planning, with everyone comfortable and happy as their vacation unfolded exactly as they had hoped it would. At 3:16 p.m. Central Time, approximately 1 hour and 7 minutes into the flight, the routine tranquility of United 232 shattered in an instant that would forever change aviation history and the lives of everyone aboard, transforming a peaceful afternoon flight into a desperate struggle for survival that would test every aspect of human courage, skill, and determination. The No. 2 engine, mounted in the tail of the aircraft, suffered a catastrophic failure that began with a hairline crack in a titanium fan disc, a flaw so small that it had evaded detection during routine inspections, but which had grown over years of normal operation until it reached the critical point where metal fatigue overcame. Engineering strength. The failure occurred with the violence of an explosion, sending titanium shrapnel tearing through the aircraft's hydraulic systems like deadly fragments designed to destroy the very arteries that allowed pilots to control their machine. The sound created by the disintegrating engine was unlike anything passengers or crew had ever experienced. a mechanical scream of tortured metal followed by the sickening sensation of violent shaking that announced the beginning of an emergency unlike any in commercial aviation experience. In the passenger cabin, the noise and vibration created immediate terror as people struggled to understand what was happening to their aircraft, while flight attendants attempted to assess the situation and provide reassurance despite their own fears. In the cockpit, Captain Haynes and his crew faced instrument readings that defied their training and experience, as warning lights illuminated across the panel like a Christmas tree of mechanical distress, while the aircraft began to exhibit flight characteristics that no amount of simulator training had prepared them to handle. The initial assumption was that they had experienced an engine failure, a serious but manageable emergency that commercial pilots train for throughout their careers. However, as flight engineer Dvorak attempted to run through the engine failure checklist, the crew discovered that their emergency was far worse than a simple engine problem, as all three independent hydraulic systems showed zero pressure, a failure mode that McDonnell Douglas engineers had considered so unlikely that no procedures existed for dealing with complete hydraulic loss. Without hydraulic power, the DC-10's primary flight controls became useless pieces of metal, leaving the pilots with no conventional means of controlling the aircraft's pitch, roll, or yaw as the massive airliner began a series of uncontrolled oscillations that threatened to tear the aircraft apart as aerodynamic forces acted upon control surfaces that could no longer be commanded by human will. The situation represented every pilot's worst nightmare, an aircraft that had become essentially uncontrollable through normal means, subject to the whims of physics, rather than the precision of human engineering and pilot skill. The flight data recorder, that crucial device that would later help investigators understand the sequence of events, began recording parameters that documented the crew's desperate attempts to regain control of their aircraft, using methods that existed nowhere in any flight manual or training program. Captain Haynes immediately declared an emergency with air traffic control, his voice professional despite the magnitude of the crisis, as he explained that United 232 was experiencing complete hydraulic failure and would require vectors to the nearest suitable airport. The air traffic controllers, initially skeptical that such a failure could occur, quickly realized the severity of the situation as radar showed the aircraft's erratic flight path and declining altitude. United Airlines Captain Dennis Fitch, who had been traveling as a passenger in the cabin and was making his way to the lavatory when the emergency began, recognized the sounds and sensations of a major mechanical failure and made the decision that would prove crucial to the survival of 185 passengers and crew members. Despite having no official authority or responsibility, he made his way to the cockpit to offer his assistance, bringing additional expertise to a situation that would require every ounce of aviation knowledge and innovative thinking the crew could muster. His arrival in the cockpit created a four-man team of experienced pilots who could pool their knowledge and experience in an attempt to solve an aeronautical puzzle that had never been encountered in commercial aviation history. Together, the four men began experimenting with differential thrust from the remaining two wing-mounted engines, discovering through trial and error that careful manipulation of power settings could provide crude but potentially life-saving control over the aircraft's trajectory. This technique, never practiced or even contemplated in any training scenario, became their only hope of guiding the crippled DC-10 toward an airport where emergency responders waited with ambulances and fire trucks. The process required constant attention and minute adjustments, as the aircraft's tendency to oscillate made it extremely difficult to maintain any semblance of controlled flight. The passenger cabin had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos as flight attendants implemented emergency procedures, while passengers grappled with the reality that their routine flight had become a fight for survival against forces beyond their comprehension or control. The violent oscillations created by the aircraft's compromised control systems made normal movement through the cabin extremely dangerous, while the constant changes in altitude and attitude created physical stress that tested the limits of human endurance. Oxygen masks deployed automatically as the aircraft descended below 10,000 feet, adding to the atmosphere of crisis while providing essential life support for passengers who were already struggling with fear and disorientation. In her new seat several rows ahead of her family, 11-year-old Sabrina found herself surrounded by strangers as the aircraft continued its violent oscillations, unable to return to the comfort and security of her parents' presence during the most terrifying experience of her young life. The adult passengers around her, including James Patterson, who had become her friend during the first hour of the flight, did their best to provide reassurance and protection, but everyone aboard understood that they were experiencing something far beyond the normal parameters of commercial aviation safety. The businessman who had patiently answered her questions about aviation technology now found himself trying to shield a child from forces that no human engineering had anticipated or prepared for. Patterson later recalled how Sabrina displayed remarkable courage during those terrifying minutes, asking questions about what was happening while trying to comfort other passengers who were clearly frightened by the aircraft's erratic behavior. Her natural curiosity, which had led her to change seats for a better view of the engines, now served her as she attempted to understand the mechanical crisis that had befallen their flight. The adults around her marveled at her composure, while doing everything they could to create a protective cocoon of calm in the midst of mechanical chaos that threatened everyone aboard. Flight attendant Susan White and her colleagues moved through the cabin with professional composure that masked their own fears, helping passengers prepare for what they knew would be an extremely dangerous landing attempt, while dealing with equipment and cabin fixtures that had been damaged by the violent oscillations that continued to shake the aircraft. The crew's training had prepared them for many emergency scenarios, but nothing in their experience had equipped them to deal with an aircraft that had essentially become an uncontrollable projectile, subject to the laws of physics rather than the precision of human engineering. Their instructions to passengers took on desperate urgency as they explained crash positions and evacuation procedures that everyone hoped they would never need to use, but which might mean the difference between life and death in the minutes ahead. The cabin crew's professionalism during the emergency became legendary within the aviation industry as they continued to serve passengers and maintain order despite their own knowledge that the aircraft's condition made survival extremely unlikely. They moved through the cabin distributing pillows and blankets to help passengers create protective barriers against impact, while explaining emergency procedures with a calm professionalism that helped prevent panic, even as everyone aboard understood the gravity of their situation. Their actions exemplified the highest traditions of airline service, placing passenger welfare above their own safety, even in circumstances that tested the limits of human courage. Air traffic controllers at Minneapolis Center and later Sioux City Approach worked frantically to clear airspace and coordinate emergency response as United 232 limped across Iowa toward what would become one of aviation's most remarkable demonstrations of crew resource management under impossible circumstances. The controllers' initial disbelief at reports of complete hydraulic failure gave way to urgent professionalism as they realized the magnitude of the emergency and began mobilizing resources from across the region. They cleared other aircraft from the area while providing radar vectors that would guide the crippled DC-10 towards Sioux City, the nearest airport with runways long enough to accommodate a wide-body aircraft and emergency services capable of handling a major disaster. The pilots' radio transmissions revealed the magnitude of their challenge as they reported complete loss of flight controls while attempting to maintain some semblance of controlled flight through engine power alone, a technique that existed nowhere in aviation literature, but which represented their only hope of survival. Ground-based emergency services mobilized resources from across the region, preparing for a disaster that could potentially claim hundreds of lives, while hoping that the skill and determination of the flight crew might create opportunities for survival that logic suggested were impossible. Fire departments, hospitals, and emergency medical services from multiple jurisdictions converged on Sioux City Airport, creating the largest emergency response in Iowa's history. The approach to Sioux City became an exercise in applied physics as the crew attempted to use engine thrust to control an aircraft that was never designed to be flown in such a manner, with each adjustment to power settings creating unpredictable changes in the aircraft's attitude and trajectory. The DC-10's natural stability, built into its design to make normal flight smooth and predictable, now worked against the crew's efforts as the aircraft fought their attempts to guide it toward the airport. Every mile of progress towards Sioux City required constant attention and adjustment, with the four-man crew working together in a display of teamwork that would become a textbook example of crew resource management under extreme pressure. As the aircraft approached Sioux City, Iowa, Captain Haynes made the decision to attempt a landing on runway 22, even though the crew's limited control authority made a successful landing extremely unlikely, according to every principle of aviation physics and engineering. The DC-10's approach was a testament to human determination and skill as the flight crew managed to guide their crippled aircraft toward the airport, using only the thrust from 2 engines and prayers that physics would somehow allow them to survive impact with the ground. The aircraft's speed was far higher than normal for landing, while its rate of descent exceeded safe parameters by a dangerous margin, but the crew had managed to align their aircraft with the runway in a demonstration of airmanship that defied conventional wisdom. In the cabin, passengers braced for impact, while flight attendants continued their duties with courage that exemplified the highest traditions of professional aviation service, moving through the aircraft to ensure that everyone was prepared for the violent impact that awaited. The final minutes became a test of human endurance, as passengers held crash positions while the aircraft shuddered and shook through its final approach, everyone aboard understanding that survival would depend as much on chance as on the skill of the flight crew. Prayers were whispered in multiple languages as people from different backgrounds and beliefs found common ground in their shared humanity and hope for survival. The impact occurred at 4:07 p.m. Central Time as United 232 struck runway 22 at Sioux City Airport with a violence that immediately began tearing the aircraft apart as the DC-10 structure failed under loads that exceeded every design specification in ways that no engineer had ever contemplated. The aircraft's right wing tip struck the runway first, causing the massive airliner to cartwheel across the airport property as sections of fuselage separated and scattered across hundreds of yards of Iowa farmland. The forward section of the aircraft, where Sabrina had chosen to sit for a better view of the engines, bore the brunt of the impact forces as the cockpit and first-class cabin absorbed energy that no human body could survive. In the middle and aft sections of the aircraft, where the Michelson family remained in their original seats, survival became possible as the aircraft's breakup created pockets of survivable space amid the devastation, with some seats remaining attached to intact sections of floor structure that provided protection from the fires and debris that filled the crash site. The random nature of survival in aircraft accidents became brutally apparent as adjacent seats experienced vastly different impact forces, with some passengers walking away with minor injuries, while others in nearby locations suffered fatal trauma from the same event. Emergency responders rushed to the burning wreckage as aviation fuel fed fires that consumed portions of the aircraft, while survivors emerged from sections of the fuselage that had somehow remained intact despite the violence of the crash sequence. The rescue operation became a race against time as firefighters and paramedics worked to extract survivors from twisted metal while battling flames that threatened to consume evidence of one of the most remarkable survival stories in aviation history. The sight of survivors walking away from wreckage that looked unsurvivable amazed rescue workers who had expected to find only casualties when they first saw the extent of the debris field. Of the 296 people aboard United 232, 185 survived the crash in what experts consider one of the most remarkable survival rates in the history of major aviation disasters, a testament to the skill of the flight crew who had managed to maintain some semblance of control during their final approach, the professionalism of the cabin crew who had prepared passengers for impact, and the quick response of emergency personnel who minimized additional casualties through their rapid and effective rescue efforts. The survival rate defied statistical predictions for such a catastrophic failure, proving that human skill and determination could create opportunities for life even in circumstances that seemed to offer only death. Among the survivors, the Michelson family faced the devastating reality that their decision to allow Sabrina to change seats had determined her fate in the most cruel and random way imaginable, transforming what should have been a minor accommodation into the factor that separated their daughter from life itself. While they had survived in the aircraft's middle section, their 11-year-old daughter had perished in the forward section, where the impact forces proved unsurvivable. Her young life ended in pursuit of a better view of the mechanical marvels that had fascinated her imagination. The arbitrary nature of survival in aviation disasters became painfully clear as investigators later determined that seat location had been the primary factor in determining who lived and who died when United 232 broke apart during the crash sequence. David and Margaret Michelson found themselves among the walking wounded, physically intact, but emotionally shattered by the loss that had transformed their family vacation into a nightmare from which they would never fully recover. Their son Tommy, just 8 years old, had survived with minor injuries, but would carry the psychological scars of losing his sister and experiencing such trauma at an age when children should be protected from life's harshest realities. The family's joy at their own survival was forever tempered by the knowledge that Sabrina would not be returning home with them, that her empty bedroom would serve as a constant reminder of how quickly and randomly tragedy can strike even the most careful and loving families. The investigation that followed revealed the extraordinary chain of events that had led to the catastrophic engine failure and complete hydraulic system loss that made controlled flight impossible, beginning with a microscopic flaw in the titanium fan disc that had been present since the component's manufacture 17 years earlier. Metallurgical analysis of the failed engine components showed that the fatigue crack had propagated over many years of normal service, growing imperceptibly with each flight cycle until it reached critical size during the routine operation of Flight 232. The failure had occurred in a location that made it virtually impossible to detect during routine inspections, highlighting the limitations of even the most sophisticated maintenance procedures in preventing certain types of mechanical failures. The technical investigation revealed that the explosive failure of the number 2 engine had sent titanium fragments through all 3 hydraulic systems in a pattern of destruction that no engineer had anticipated when designing the aircraft's safety systems. The DC-10's hydraulic lines were routed through areas near the tail-mounted engine to optimize aircraft performance and weight distribution, but this design philosophy created a single point of failure that violated the basic principles of redundancy that normally protect aircraft from catastrophic system loss. The investigation's findings led to immediate changes in aircraft design standards and maintenance procedures that would prevent similar failures in future aircraft. The technical lessons learned from United 232 led to significant improvements in aircraft design and maintenance procedures that have enhanced safety throughout the aviation industry, ensuring that Sabrina's death and the loss of 110 other victims would contribute to preventing similar tragedies in the future. Aircraft manufacturers began implementing additional redundancy in flight control systems, recognizing that the complete loss of hydraulic power, while extremely rare, represented a scenario that crews needed to be able to address through alternative control methods. New designs incorporated backup manual reversion capabilities and additional separation between critical system components to prevent single failures from cascading into complete control loss. Maintenance inspection procedures were enhanced to better detect the types of fatigue cracks that had initiated the engine failure, while new non-destructive testing methods were developed to identify microscopic flaws that could grow into catastrophic failures over time. The Federal Aviation Administration mandated more frequent inspections of critical engine components and required airlines to track the service history of individual parts with greater precision to identify patterns that might indicate potential problems before they resulted in failures. These changes represented a fundamental shift in aviation maintenance philosophy, from reactive repairs to proactive prevention through enhanced monitoring and analysis. The heroism displayed by Captain Haynes and his crew during the emergency became legendary within the aviation community, demonstrating how exceptional airmanship and innovative thinking could create survival opportunities even in seemingly hopeless situations that defied conventional training and procedures. Their use of differential engine thrust to control an aircraft never designed for such techniques became a case study in crew resource management and emergency procedures that influenced pilot training programs worldwide. The successful partial control of Flight 232 under impossible circumstances proved that human creativity and determination could overcome mechanical limitations when conventional solutions were unavailable. Aviation training programs began incorporating scenarios based on the United 232 emergency, teaching pilots how to think beyond standard procedures when faced with situations that exceeded the boundaries of normal training and aircraft design. Simulator manufacturers developed training scenarios that allowed flight crews to practice the techniques pioneered by Captain Haynes and his team, ensuring that future emergencies might benefit from the lessons learned through their innovative approach to an unprecedented crisis. The crew's actions became a benchmark for aviation professionalism and creative problem-solving under extreme pressure. The successful evacuation of survivors from the burning wreckage also highlighted the critical importance of cabin crew training and passenger education in emergency procedures that could mean the difference between life and death in the minutes following impact. Flight attendants' actions during the emergency approach and evacuation became textbook examples of professional aviation service under extreme circumstances, while the passengers' adherence to safety briefings and emergency instructions contributed significantly to the high survival rate. Airlines enhanced their safety briefings and emergency training to incorporate lessons learned from United 232, emphasizing the importance of passenger cooperation and preparation in emergency situations. For the families of the 111 victims of United 232, including the Michelson family, the tragedy represented not just personal loss, but also the cruel randomness of survival in aviation disasters that defied logic, justice, or human understanding. The knowledge that seat location had determined survival created additional grief as families struggled with questions about fate, chance, and the impossible decisions that had separated the living from the dead in ways that seemed to mock human planning and parental protection. Support groups formed among the survivor families and victim families, creating bonds forged by shared experience of an event that forever changed their understanding of life's fragility and the importance of every moment with loved ones. The Michelson family's decision to allow Sabrina to change seats became a source of endless second-guessing and self-recrimination, despite the obvious truth that no parent could have anticipated the consequences of such an innocent request. Child psychologists worked with Tommy Michelson to help him process not only the loss of his sister, but also his own survival guilt and the trauma of experiencing such violence at an impressionable age. The family's healing process would take years and would never truly be complete, as birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings would forever include an empty place that served as a reminder of their loss. Margaret Michelson later established a foundation in Sabrina's memory that provided support for families of aviation accident victims, channeling her grief into efforts to help others navigate the complex emotional and practical challenges that follow such tragedies. The Foundation's work included advocating for improvements in aviation safety, supporting research into accident survivability, and providing resources for families dealing with the aftermath of aviation disasters. Through this work, Sabrina's memory continued to contribute to aviation safety and family support long after the immediate impact of the crash had faded from public attention. The story of Sabrina Michelson and United 232 continues to resonate within the aviation safety community as a reminder that even the most sophisticated safety systems cannot eliminate all risks from commercial aviation, but that human skill, courage, and determination can create opportunities for survival even in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. Her memory lives on in the safety improvements that resulted from the investigation of United 232, ensuring that future generations of passengers benefit from the lessons learned through such tragic circumstances. Every enhanced inspection procedure, every improved aircraft design, and every refined emergency training program represents her lasting contribution to aviation safety. The crash site in Sioux City has become a place of remembrance where visitors can reflect on the fragility of life and the courage of those who face death with dignity and determination, while honoring the memory of those who perished and celebrating the survival of those who lived to carry their stories forward. Memorials honor both the victims who perished and the survivors who carried forward the memory of that July afternoon when an 11-year-old girl's simple decision to change seats became part of one of aviation's most heartbreaking stories of survival and loss. The site serves as a reminder that behind every aviation safety statistic are real people whose lives were forever changed by events beyond their control or comprehension. Today, as we remember Sabrina Michelson and all the victims of United 232, we honor their contribution to aviation safety through the improvements that resulted from their tragedy, ensuring that their loss was not in vain, but instead became the foundation for preventing similar disasters in the future. Every enhanced inspection procedure, every improved aircraft design, and every refined emergency procedure represents their lasting legacy to the millions of passengers who fly safely because of lessons learned from their loss. Their story reminds us that behind every aviation safety statistic are real people whose lives and dreams were cut short, but whose memory continues to protect others through the dedication of those who refuse to let their sacrifice be forgotten. The legacy of United 232 extends beyond technical improvements to include a deeper understanding of human factors in aviation emergencies, demonstrating how ordinary people can display extraordinary courage when faced with circumstances that test the limits of human endurance and determination. The passengers and crew who faced that July afternoon with dignity and mutual support created a model for how communities respond to crisis, while the investigators and safety experts who learned from their experience ensured that their courage would benefit generations of future travelers who would never know their names but would benefit from their sacrifice. If this story has touched your heart and made you think about the heroes who risk everything to save others in moments of crisis, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that honor the courage and sacrifice of those who have shaped aviation history through their extraordinary responses to unimaginable circumstances. Share your thoughts in the comments about how we can continue to honor the memory of those lost while working to prevent similar tragedies in the future, and how the lessons learned from disasters like United 232 continue to make aviation safer for everyone who trusts their lives to the miracle of flight. Your engagement helps ensure that these important stories reach others who need to understand the human cost of the safety we often take for granted when we board an aircraft and trust our lives to the skill and dedication of aviation professionals who carry forward the legacy of those who came before them.